Appointment with a ballot. Rwandans embark on electing new legislators. Donor support. Another international conference on Somalia kicks off in the Belgian capital. And a technology boost. We tell you how a mobile phone platform is transforming maternal health care in Uganda. Welcome to Africa Live on CCTV News with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, pressure piles up on the South African government to conclude inquiry into last year's shooting that left 34 dead. And a dominant performance. Runners from Ethiopia and Kenya win the Great North Run Half Marathon. We begin in Rwanda, where voting is now underway in Rwanda in the third parliamentary election since the end of the genocide experienced in that country in 1994. Rwandans hope the vote, which has been relatively peaceful so far, will be a reflection of the country's democratic credentials. But some opposition leaders are saying the elections are simply a farce. They argue that the results of the parliamentary elections are already decided, with President Paul Kagame's Rwanda Patriotic Front expected to emerge victorious. The elections are also set to bring women to the forefront. In the previous parliament, women were the majority, with 56% of parliamentary seats held by women. Rwanda had the world's highest proportion of female political representatives, ahead of Sweden, which ranks fourth after Andorra and Cuba. Well, let's now take a brief look at Rwanda's history. In April of 1994, the then President Habyarimana and the Burundian president were killed after their plane is shot down over Kigali. RPF launches a major offensive. Extremist Hutu militia and elements of the Rwandan military begin the systemic massacre of Tutsis. Within 100 days, around 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus are killed. Well, later on, the RPF forms a provisional government and Pastio Bizimungu becomes president of Rwanda. The International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda is established, and in April of 2000, ministers and members of parliament elect Vice President Paul Kagame as Rwanda's new president. In 2003, President Kagame wins the first presidential election since the genocide. The country has since been dominated by Kagame's Rwandan Patriotic Front, and in 2006, the country entered a high period of economic growth. The following year, it managed to register 8% economic growth, a record it has sustained ever since, turning it into one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. In 2012, former soldiers of the Congolese army formed a rebel group known as the M23, and the United Nations soon accuses Rwanda of backing that movement, an allegation Rwanda vehemently denies. We are staying with that story for the moment. In the meantime, as the Rwandans concentrate on their legislative elections, southern African nations have expressed concern at the growing number of Rwandan troops on the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo. A statement issued from a summit in Namibia attended by Congolese President Joseph Kabila called on the country's neighbors to contribute to peace, security and stability of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, Congolese troops backed by a special United Nations force launched a fresh assault against M23 rebels late last month in DRC's northeast. SADC also praised the DR Congo's government troops and the UN brigade for continuing to exert military pressure on M23 and destabilizing forces active in eastern DRC. Now, across Africa, child mortality remains a serious challenge. The first few days of life are critical, and without the right access to medical care, many newborns do not make it. But in Uganda, the innovative use of technology is now helping to transform maternal health care delivery. Clementine Logan has more.
Baby Brian is just days old. He's almost out of danger. In developing countries, the first few days of life are the most dangerous. Child mortality is a constant source of worry for parents and health workers. But at this health centre, mobile phone reception provides a link with the outside world that has helped keep Brian alive. M-Track is a mobile phone system that enables health workers across the country to communicate directly with the Ministry of Health using simple text messages. Any clinician can alert public health officials in real time about disease outbreaks and depletion of critical drugs. This has helped Uganda cut the number of child deaths by 2/3.
What initially we couldn't think of, we are now demanding for more space, more equipment, more drugs. We are no longer experiencing wastage of drugs because of underutilization.
Before M-Track, health workers could wait months for life-saving medicines to be restocked.
Right now, the district can be able to look at his M-Track dashboard and identify which facilities have sufficient stock, which ones have a stock out, and be able to do a redistribution within his own district.
Volunteers from village health teams like Esther are on the front line against the big killers of children, like malaria, pneumonia and diarrhea. Their advice can save lives.
Esther taught me about proper feeding, to go to antenatal care and to sleep under a mosquito net.
M-Track is being developed to send health messages out to more remote rural areas in local dialects. And with the third highest fertility rate in the world, Uganda is likely to rely on innovative high-tech products like this to help protect future generations. Clementine Logan, CCTV.
Well, to stay with us here on Africa Live as we still have more news, views and analysis for you coming up. We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need a trade justice.
Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life.
We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world. You're watching Africa Live on CCTV News with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. An international conference being referred to as a new deal for Somalia is getting underway in the Belgian capital, Brussels. The Somali government and international donors are expected to sign up to a 3-year plan to rebuild the country following 2 decades of internal strife. The conference is also expected to commit Somalia to a set of social and economic goals to be reached over the next 3 years. It is also expected to endorse the relationship between the Horn of Africa nation and its European Union partners with pledges for new funding, which the European Union officials hope could reach more than 1 billion euros. The European Union is the largest donor to Somalia and helps fund the AMISOM peacekeeping force, which has driven Islamist Al-Shabaab rebels out of the capital, Mogadishu. Let's get more now on that developing story. I'm joined by CCTV's Mohamed Hirmoge live from the capital, Mogadishu. Mohamed, what are the expectations, though, from this international conference being held again for Somalia?
Well, because there is optimism that this conference might be different from all the other conferences on Somalia held in Istanbul, London, and now in Brussels. Well, this one has a new connotation, the connotation that it's a New Deal compact for Somalia, the New Deal, new plan, new engagement. These are terms of references between the EU and Somalia now. And this, what is supposed to be endorsed today is a 3-year proposal that is a strategic framework for partnership between the international community and Somalia that will provide modes to coordinate both political, security, and development efforts over a period of 3 years. The EU has been engaged in 2 sectors that have been successful in Somalia. One is the EU training mission for Somali soldiers, a mission that has trained 3,000 soldiers so far. And we understand earlier this year, EU ministers voted to extend the training mission by another 2 years at a cost of 11 million euros. That is one. The other area which the EU has been engaged in and have been quite successful is the anti-piracy sector. The EU's Operation Atalanta, EU's mission that is mandated to tackle the menace of piracy along the Gulf of Aden. And the EU has provided fleets and armed armada along the coastline of Somalia, and that has been able to drop significantly the menace of piracy. And therefore, judging by those 2 factors and the fact that this is a new deal, a new engagement, and a new contract between Somalia and the EU, there is indeed some expectations that this conference might be different.
All right. Sandra Gathman is also joining us now live from the Belgian capital, Brussels. Sandra, how does this conference, though, differ from previous international efforts to assist Somalia? There have been several international conferences held on Somalia in the past few years.
Well, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm with this conference that through this new deal, there's a renewed push to increase good governance practice because the Somalian government is effectively pledging to go full speed ahead with this broad institutional revamp. And as we heard Mohammed saying, billions of euros have been donated by the EU in the last several years, I believe since 2008. But in the meantime, a lot of focus has been towards combating terrorism, which many actually agree has fallen thanks to these big international efforts and funding programs to curb piracy and so on. But a lot of that state aid pledged by the EU, many agree has yet to manifest itself in terms of the country's constitutional setup, revamping the judiciary system, public finances. And so this is the Somalian government pledging a real political drive, a renewed political drive to clean up the state.
All right. Mohammed, to you, though, in Mogadishu, have there been any changes felt on the ground since the last Somalia International Conference last May?
Well, because indeed, whereas there is a confidence that the country has turned the corner and the country is now on the path towards recovery, and that can be proved by the renewed vigor and strength with which the people are rebuilding and businesses are thriving. But when I put the same question to the president of Somalia, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, he told me quite honestly that indeed there is a natural thing with pledges, that what is pledged is totally different from what finally the country receives. And as such, since all the other conferences between last year and this year, we did not see a surge in development. I mean, we don't see infrastructure development, for instance, in the capital. We don't see new schools and bridges and hospitals over here. But what we see is that the funding, we are told, has been used in an abstract way, maybe in funding counter-piracy issues, maybe in training missions, maybe in donations in terms of food aids to the thousands of the IDPs and refugees in Somalia and beyond. But right now, we don't have any tangible thing that we can say, any tangible project right now in Mogadishu or in other parts of the country that can point to the fact that indeed here is the fruit of a pledge from any of the previous conferences.
All right, Sandra, the transitional federal government, the previous transitional federal government, though, had been dogged by allegations of corruption. There is still some concern over corruption and poor management of donor funds with the administration in Somalia today. Will there be pressure, though, being put on Somalia to enhance accountability and transparency?
Of course, I think under this new deal, that pressure is going to be stronger than ever, and that is, of course, the ultimate goal. And we heard Somalian President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed today at the conference saying that he really wants the people of Somalia to believe, as Mohammed said, his government's campaign of zero corruption. And obviously, through this new deal, to overhaul existing state institutions, set up new ones, set up a multi-party electoral process, and so on, citizens will see the real beginnings of a democratic framework, and through that, of course, increase transparency, delineate roles in public offices, and that will, of course, all help. There is, of course, skepticism, and that will stay for a while, that these counterterrorism and security efforts in the country are taking precedent over better governance initiatives. And obviously, we heard Al-Shabaab, the militant group in the country, say today, issuing a small statement over Twitter, that, well, they dismissed this conference in Brussels as being useless. They say the funds will be going into the pockets of officials in power, and that is, of course, a position that they've long held and will continue to hold, being in opposition. But that is certainly not the hopeful attitude of many involved in this Somalian program here in Brussels. And as we see security efforts in the country improve the situation there, more schools being built and so on, I think many here in the EU are confident that continued funding will make a difference.
All right, Sandra Guthman joining us there from Brussels, and Mohammed Hirmoge in Mogadishu. Thank you to you both. We'll take a short break now here on Africa Live, but coming up, pressure piles on the South African government to conclude inquiry into last year's shooting that left 34 people dead. South African fast food restaurant operator Famous Brands has said it will buy a 49% stake of the restaurant arm of UAC of Nigeria to bolster its presence in Africa's most populous country. The value of the deal has not yet been disclosed, but Famous Brands said it would give it a wider footprint in Nigeria, where it has operated for the past 11 years through license and franchise agreements. UAC Restaurants has 165 franchise restaurants in Nigeria, with 57 of those in Lagos that include the popular Mr. Biggs brand and Famous Brands. South African companies are increasingly looking to fast-growing sub-Saharan markets as growth in the home market slows. Famous Brands operates the Steers and Wimpy fast food restaurants in South Africa. While staying in South Africa, South African miners who witnessed the deaths of 34 of their colleagues at a shooting at the Lonmin Platinum Mine last year say that they will not give up in their search for justice. The group, Citizens for Marikana, is demanding that the state pays legal fees for the inquiry. But the government has turned down this demand. CCTV's Guy Henderson now reports.
For now, their occasional office is the quiet corner of a restaurant. A group brought together by what they see as a travesty of justice. Calling themselves Citizens for Marikana and looking to fund the legal fees for some of the miners that were there that day.
We neither support nor are against any of the parties. What we really want is to ensure that the South African democracy and justice is aided by the Falam Commission.
After last year's shooting, the president set up an inquiry, which continues, but sporadically. The state pays for lawyers representing its employees, including police. But the country's constitutional court ruled last month it couldn't force funding for all of those on the other side.
In the Constitutional Court's view, this was not a criminal trial, and therefore it seemed to say that the Section 35 rights that accused persons have in a trial to legal defense at state expense would not apply. It did seem to also say that in terms of the equality arguments raised, that it couldn't see how issues of fairness might ground a right to legal representation.
It's a dispute that's led to constant delays.
Sounds of the span clarinet.
And on our visit to an almost empty session, adjourned again. Now, this latest adjournment has been due to the fact that the Commission now shares this venue with the municipality, which simply need to use the venue for something else next week. But it's constant stoppages like this that are beginning to undermine public confidence in this whole process and has left many wondering whether the full truth will ever emerge.
Could this go on for another year, or what's...
Though that's something the Commission strongly refutes.
There is no question about the truth coming out. I mean, the Commission is very, very thorough in its work. You would also remember that everything that has been done is done legally, respecting the laws of the land, and also ensuring that there is no violation of anybody's rights, as it were.
The man representing the victims, Dali Mpofu, has provisionally withdrawn. He hasn't been paid.
It's very difficult to understand.
That's what this group seeks to change. It's a start, but not much more. Di Henderson, CCTV, Johannesburg.
Let's take a quick look at how the markets performed in early morning trade today across the continent. The Nigeria All-Share Index was 0.29%, while the Johannesburg Stock Exchange Africa All-Share was little changed at 43,608.66 points. The Nairobi Securities Exchange 20 share in Nairobi traded 0.34% in the green, while the EGX 30 in Egypt was posted 0.68% stronger. We'll take another short break here on Africa Live, but coming up, the sport.